Today, we're excited to welcome Ryan Bartlett as our featured speaker. He'll be talking about environmental, health, and safety regulations for startups in the biopharma and biotech industries. Ryan will cover OSHA regulations, CDC requirements, and other pertinent permitting and regulatory requirements. Ryan is an associate consultant at BSI Group. He has a range of safety experience, including work with high containment biological agents, chemical agents, radioactive materials, and pharmaceutical production facilities. He has acted as lab manager and training mentor of a large Biosafety Level 3 containment suite, where he assisted with emergency procedures to ensure staff safety. Ryan, thanks so much for joining us today. Before I hand it over, I'd like to review some quick housekeeping tips. If you can submit your questions in the control panel underneath the questions tab, we'll address all of these at the end of Ryan's presentation. We'll also send a copy of Ryan's presentation afterwards, so don't worry about taking too many notes. And with that said, Ryan, feel free to take it away.
All right, thank you very much. My name is Ryan, and I will be going over some environmental health and safety considerations for startups. On the agenda today, we'll talk about who is BSI, what do we do as a company, and how we were able to help. Talk about environmental health and safety considerations for biopharma, biotech startups. Talk about the safety program, the programs that need to be implemented, the trainings, the compliance issues. Talk about environmental considerations such as permitting and inspections. Talk about regulations and guidelines set forth from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the National Institutes of Health, as well as some steps that we can use to implement these. So to discuss who BSI is, I'm going to introduce my colleague Dawn, and she is going to go ahead and introduce you guys to BSI.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Ryan. I really appreciate it. My name is Dawn Carlson. I'm the Business Development Director for Pharmaceuticals within BSI. Pharmaceuticals is an individual sector within our healthcare umbrella. We also provide medical device services, and we do have a hospitals division as well. So as you can see on the slide, BSI is actually a very large company, although not everyone knows who we are. We have over 100 years experience. Mostly, we're known for helping small and large organizations with strategic and operational solutions for many of the business challenges that we encounter. So we have end-to-end solutions. These can help create best practices for business, and our tagline is making excellence a habit. As you may be aware, it's hard to achieve, right? So we're all looking for ways to improve our businesses. And we have everything from turnkey end-to-end solutions or just bespoke small aspects of consulting and training that we can provide. Next slide, Ryan.
Right.
Is it moving?
There we go. There we go.
Ah, thank you. Sorry about the animation. So we have a number of business sectors under BSI, and we break these down into just a few areas of consulting, training, certifying, auditing, software, and knowledge solutions. We actually can consult and train in nearly all aspects of regulatory requirements, and we can do this across just about every industry, from automotive and aerospace all the way through to waste management. So we are a notifying and certifying body for regulation of bodies such as ISOs, EH&S and OSHA standards, and the medical device authorities. We are able to audit and then certify against any of these ISOs that you may encounter. We also are probably one of the top medical device certification companies in the world. Right now, there's only about 3 that are going to adapt to the new MDR, MDSAP regulations that will be coming into play next year. And so we will be a notifying body as of March 31st of 2019, I believe. Next slide. I'm moving quick so we have more time to spend on EH&S. So operational resilience is really the core of what we do. So we can actually help small and large organizations with unusual services that you would not normally encounter, which is things like corporate social responsibility, anti-bribery, corruption, and business sustainability. Continuity with a business, especially large corporations that maybe operate multi-global site processes in manufacturing, often need to have sister sites and duplicate or redundant backup plans. So we actually have a large serviceability within business continuity. Cybersecurity and information resilience, as you know, is becoming a forefront. Obviously, we need to ensure that our data is secure and that our systems are impenetrable, but as you know, even the big corporations get breached. CVS, Merck, you name it, they've all been held for ransom. They've all had data breaches. So we actually have a 24/7 cybersecurity team that operates out of Ireland, and they are top in class when it comes to penetration testing. They actually sell the software Wombat, which is really becoming very critical for organizations to ensure their cybersecurity and information resilience is up to par with the new GDPR regulations. We also have ISO 27001 to certify as close as possible against the GDPR regulations, and they actually 27001 is the ISO standard to show cybersecurity. Next slide. That's okay, don't worry about it. So one of the aspects of all of our offerings that you may be interested in is supply chain resilience. In our pharmaceutical sector or biosciences, health sciences sector, we find that supply chain, logistics, risk management, risk reduction, all of these things are definitely of interest with the amount of counterfeit or even just stolen goods in the pipeline. Having supply chain risk management is really important. So we do have proprietary software to help in this aspect. We have the ability to do real-time risk intelligence monitoring, and these are open and closed sources that we pull this information from. The software is very dynamic, it is very user-friendly, and it's easy to take your current supply chain and logistics programs, whether you are small and run on Excel spreadsheets, or maybe you run on something as large as JD Edwards, and incorporate that information into our software. We have full-time 24/7 help with managing the software, although it's very simple and straightforward. Along with this software, it manages all of your vendor compliance and audits. So there's a whole section of the software that actually can help protect you against a vendor going out of compliance. So if you have any questions about this, I'd be happy to help. Feel free to contact me after the presentation. One of the things we offer within our supply chain team is GMP auditing anywhere in the world. It's a set price. I can actually answer any questions about that at the end, but we do offer GMP first, second, and third party auditing wherever you would need it. And we have plenty of slots left in 2018, and obviously 2019 is, it's pretty flexible at the moment. The first 3 months are getting filled up, but if you have any interest there, please let me know. And Ryan, I think that's my last slide.
Okay. Yep. All right. Thank you, Dawn.
Thanks, Ryan.
So going into some general considerations for environmental health and safety. EH&S is vital to any company, and it begins really early in the process. You want to build the safety culture so that you have staff that are compliant, you have a compliant facility, but you also have staff that feel safe and enjoy working in your environments. You want to understand the building and the engineering requirements that go into a lab or a production facility, understanding the federal, state, and local regulations. And then you want to look at the roles and responsibilities that differ between the management and employees. So some things to consider as far as construction and engineering. One big part is tenant improvement. This is designed through construction and ensuring that the building is where you want it for your space, making sure that you're ready to relocate, making sure that the destination is prepared and good to go when you arrive on site. That will help cut down on any lag time and allow your lab or production to get up and running quickly. Origin preparation, making sure that all your documents and chemicals are transferred properly, and making sure that you close your current sites if you have one properly. So TI design through construction, you want to make sure that the stakeholders are involved. That'd be investors or management. You make sure that they understand what's going on and get their input. You want to define requirements and site selection. So if you have a lab, you want to make sure that you're able to implement any of the engineering controls that you need. Biosafety cabinets, chemical fume hoods, things like that. Plan your architectural considerations, determine your control zones, and coordinate in buildings that may have multi-tenants so that construction doesn't interrupt other operations. You want to validate applicable use requirements. Depending on what type of facility you are, you may have biological, chemistry, radiation. You may have a vivarium if you're doing animal testing. You may have all four of these. And then you also want to make sure that the proper safety components are constructed into your facility. A lot of times these get overlooked and get put in at the last minute and may not be in a very convenient spot. You want to make sure you have a space for your eye wash and safety showers. Make sure you have your fire extinguishing systems in place, chemical fume hoods and biological safety cabinets. And you want to make sure that your egress and assembly areas are easy to access and easily identifiable. So starting with some regulatory considerations, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or OSHA, they set forth federal requirements for employers to protect the workers. And California does not have Texas does not have their own state OSHA, so they follow the federal standards. You want to look at environmental regulatory agencies such as the EPA. There may be state and local authorities as well. And then looking at biosafety and health regulations. These are set guidelines and regulations that are set forward by the CDC as well as the NIH. So OSHA has this general duty requirement that says each employer shall furnish to each of his or her employees employment and place of employment which are free from recognized hazards that are causing or likely to cause death or serious physical harm to his or her employees. So along that comes the management role in safety. So as managers or as owners, making sure that you comply with all applicable safety regulations. You want to develop job hazard analysis for each task. This will help break down each job title into different tasks and will show you where the hazards and safety concerns may come into play. You want to implement safety rules and procedures, train new as well as existing employees on safety. When you bring new employees in, you want to train them and make sure that they are on board with your safety culture and that they don't bring any bad habits from a previous employer. You want to determine if employees are capable of operating the equipment and machinery safely. This goes into training. You don't want anyone to operate any equipment until you feel safe they're capable of doing it or they feel safe they're capable of operating it. Holding regular safety meetings with your employees will also help your employees understand the rules and the requirements, and it'll also help you keep a pulse on what's going on in your facility and see where any safety concerns may be, so you can discuss your safety concerns with employees, and this includes any complaints or near misses or anything that they may have encountered in their work. You want to inspect compliance with safe work practices and conditions. Make sure that all accidents and incidents are reported. That way you can ensure that you can try and ensure that they will not happen again through a thorough investigation, a corrective action, preventative action plans. Establish consequences for noncompliance. follow through on actions, observations, and communication. Required safety programs. OSHA has a set of regulatory compliance elements that need to be put in place. These include an emergency action plan. This can include what to do in case of a fire or other natural disasters, what to do in case of a spill, fire prevention plans, chemical hygiene, how to store and handle your chemicals, a hazard communication so that employees understand what they're working with and the hazards that are associated with the chemicals or machinery that they're working with, a bloodborne pathogen and exposure control plan. This will allow any first aid responders or anyone working with human tissues or blood to be protected and understand the hazards they're working with. You may need to implement a respiratory protection program. Depending on the type of work that's going on, there may be respiratory hazards that are associated with that. And that may include something as simple as a dust mask all the way up through a full face respirator or a PAPR, a powered air purifying respirator. And then also, you may want to look at ergonomics. It's not required by federal OSHA, but a lot of injuries in the workplace come from repetitive motion or movements that aren't natural. So looking at ergonomics helps you correct or assist your employees work in a safe manner. As far as hazard communication, this is controlled under OSHA's requirement 29 CFR 1910-1200. It states that all chemicals produced or imported are classified properly, and that information concerning the hazards is communicated to the employees that will be utilizing the chemicals. All of the classifications and labeling need to be consistent with the United Nations globally harmonized system of classification and labeling of chemicals. It's known as EH&S. This includes container labeling, warning labels, warning signs, pictograms. It determines how a safety data sheet or an SDS needs to be set up. And it also requires that employees go through training and understanding of what they're handling. All right, moving on to some environmental considerations. The federal EPA has numerous requirements and regulations, but then the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality sets forth a lot of requirements in the state. This includes air permits, radioactive material permitting, stormwater pollution prevention, industrial waste, water discharge programs and permits, hazardous waste management. This would be disposal of any chemicals, and then getting into medical waste and biohazardous waste. Any treatment or disposal of these are set forth and required through the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. The Department of Transportation also has a lot of requirements for shipping, receiving of materials. There are requirements on labeling. There are requirements on what materials can be shipped via road or air. There are different requirements, and in order to ship certain items, you need to be trained and understand the hazards that are associated with shipping of that material. So some permits to consider before starting up and making sure that you understand all of these. Wastewater permitting, making sure that the water that you're disposing or putting back into the system is within regulations and specifications. You want to work with the fire department to make sure that your fire permits and your occupancy is correct. If you're doing anything with radioactive materials, you want to make sure that you're following within the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and all of their requirements for tracking and disposing of radioactive materials. If you're working with any controlled substances, the Drug Enforcement Agency, or DEA, they have a lot of tracking requirements and permitting requirements before you're able to handle or receive or ship any of those. The Department of Occupational Health, OSHA, they set forth some requirements that we discussed previously. Environmental Protection Agency, handling any hazardous materials and waste, you need to obtain an EPA ID number. This is a number that is specific to your facility and allows the material that is leaving your facility to be tracked so that it is ensured to be properly treated and disposed of. If you're doing any type of animal research, anything as small as mice all the way up through NHPs, non-human primates, the Association for Assessment and Accreditation of Laboratory Animals, Animal Care, ALAC, and the Institutional Animal Care and Use Committees, IACUC, are two big agencies. Getting accredited by ALAC can be difficult, but once you're accredited, it makes your facility kind of stand out and show that you are, for the proper care of your lab animals. Any animal research will need to go through an IACUC review process, and those are set forth on their website. Getting into some health regulations, the Centers of Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, and the National Institutes of Health, NIH, they provide guidelines for working with different bacterial, viral agents. Vector therapy is a big topic right now, and NIH has multiple standards out on the different viral vectors that are currently being used for cancer therapies or other treatments. The CDC publishes a guideline book. It's called the Biosafety and Microbiological and Biomedical Laboratories, or the BIMBL or the BMBL. This is currently in the 5th edition, and it discusses biosafety levels, safe work practices. It talks about how to properly handle each microbe at a different biosafety level and the proper PPE to wear with that. The NIH Office of Science Policy, that discusses different risk groups for the microorganisms and where they are, what biosafety level they should be held at. It also talks about biosafety committee requirements. If you're doing anything with recombinant DNA or RNA, you need to have a review committee. This is all spelled out through the NIH. Talks about having a biosafety officer, talks about the different aspects that go into approving recombinant DNA work or recombinant RNA work. So the CDC breaks out different biosafety levels, biosafety level 1, 2, 3, and 4. Also, biosafety level just known as BSL. Biosafety level 1, the agents aren't known to cause any disease in healthy adults. This is things that you run into in your everyday life that are just out in the world. Biosafety level 1, you just want to, handle things safely, make sure you have the proper PPE, protect your employees, gloves, eye protection, potentially face protection if there's any splash hazards. But there aren't any real facility requirements, just a lab bench and a sink for hand washing. Biosafety Level 2, BSL2, these agents can cause human disease. A lot of times, E. coli is in this, salmonella, a lot of foodborne illnesses are in this biosafety level. And mostly the routes of transmission are through the skin, ingestion, and mucous membrane exposure. The practices at this level include Biosafety Level 1, but then you also need to limit your access to these spaces, and that can either be with a card reader or a cipher code or a key, but it needs to be people that are trained and have shown that they can work in this environment. You need to label the lab with biohazard signs, have a biosafety manual discussing waste decon, medical surveillance, and waste disposal. Starting in the BSL2, you'll start seeing the use of biosafety cabinets, or BSCs. These help protect your employees from any aerosols that may come into play due to the practices or the research that's going on. A lot of times it's the same PPE that's required: lab coats, gloves, face and eye protection. Potentially need some respiratory protection at this point, depending on what's going on and the aerosol hazards that are there. Then you also would like to have an autoclave to help handle the waste that's coming out of the lab. The thing with decontaminating waste on site in an autoclave is the autoclave needs to be certified. And if it's not certified, then you can't say that the waste is 100% decontaminated, and so it would still be considered hazardous or medical waste. Biosafety Level 3, getting up into BSL 3 and 4, they're less common. There's a lot more requirements and regulatory paperwork that gets done, and a lot more involvement with the CDC. These are exotic agents that cause serious or potentially lethal infections, and generally are through inhalation. Examples of BSL-3 agents are Yersinia pestis, which is the causative agent of plague, Bacillus anthracis, anthrax. There's a few viruses in there as well. But the practices here are similar to BSL-2, except it is controlled access. You need 2 locked doors before you can get into the space. All waste needs to be decontaminated, whether that's through an autoclave or through a chemical means, if it's a liquid waste. Anything that's coming out of that space needs to be decontaminated. This includes clothing, lab coats, anything like that. BSCs are also highly used here. You may even get into the glove boxes, which are fully sealed, gas-tight chambers that you can do some more aerosolization of components in there. And then, as you can see, the facility requirements are there on the right as well. BSL-4, very rare to see these types of labs, but these are very dangerous and don't necessarily have any treatments or vaccines. These are things like Ebola. We heard about the outbreak over in Africa a few years ago that made its way to the United States. So we just, BSL-4 are highly regulated, and they require Class 3 BSCs, which are the glove boxes, or a full-bodied air supply suit. All right, and now moving on to risk groups that are set forth by the NIH. Risk groups 1 through 4. Risk groups 1 are not associated with disease in healthy humans, so these would be handled at a BSL-1 level. Risk group 2 are associated with human disease, but are rarely serious, and they generally have very effective therapeutic interventions. Risk group 3, serious or lethal, and risk group 4 are serious or lethal with no therapeutic interventions available. And depending on the work that's being done with each of these, that will determine the biosafety level what it needs to be handled at. And that determination will come through risk assessments that can be done through your biosafety committee. And the Institutional Biosafety Committee has its guidelines set forth by the NIH, and it states that the IBC is the cornerstone of institutional oversight of recombinant research. But an IBC also can look at the oversight of all aspects of your facility, including select agents and toxins, any work with bloodborne pathogens, stem cell research, dual use research, and even getting into nanotechnology now. So how can we implement a positive safety culture? As I said in the beginning, it's important to get your safety culture going at the very beginning so that your employees begin work under this safety culture, and they have all these expectations at the beginning instead of doing work one way and then having to do a 180 and completely change how they're working. You want to make sure you don't have a gotcha safety environment. You want people to feel comfortable reporting any incidents or accidents that happen without feeling like they're going to get in trouble. You know, there may be those steps to handle situations where they weren't following regulations or requirements in your building, but you still want them to report what happened. You want to implement the requirements and regulations while involving the employees. It gives them a feeling of ownership. If you discuss what's going on, discuss with them how it's going to affect their work. It also allows them to gain an understanding of why they're required to do these tasks. You know, no one wants to wear a respirator, but if they understand the hazards when they don't wear it, it'll help them feel more comfortable and more confident while they are wearing it. So there are a number of trainings for employees that can be set forth. All of these or some of these you can even add to this list. The ergonomic program, again, is to help protect from repetitive motion injuries, back injuries, lifting injuries. Hazard assessments, this so they can understand, you can understand what they're dealing with and how to protect the employees. Emergency action plan is set so that people understand how to respond in case there is an emergency. Environmental programs, hazardous materials, PPE, understanding what PPE to wear and when to wear it and why you're wearing it and how to dispose or take care of that is really important in a safety program. And then along those lines, you get into protecting staff from bloodborne pathogens, whether it's through providing first aid or it's through their general work. If you have any hazardous equipment on site, you need to look into a lockout tagout program, looking into accidents, doing an investigation of each accident that happens, whether it's an actual accident or even looking into near misses. These will help you understand the root cause of why that incident happened and how to protect from that happening in the future. Something else to consider is workplace violence. Only allowing people into your facility that belong there, you know, knowing the signs of how to spot someone that's, you know, not happy and, you know, could cause problems later. That's something to consider. Not many people consider it at the beginning, but, you know, if you have these requirements set up front, then they'll help. Hazard communication, chemical hygiene plan, and hazardous waste management. Those all kind of tie in together. Understanding what you're working with, how to handle it, how to protect yourself, and then how to dispose of it at the end. So all of these things that we've been talking about will help get the program up and running as quickly as possible. You know, you want to have your facility set up. You want to have the proper PPE in place. You want to have the proper engineering controls in place. You know, your fume hoods, your biosafety cabinets. You also want to ensure that your written programs are there so you have a backbone to work from. You can always change, add, clarify things in your documents, but having them from the very beginning will allow you to set this safety culture up and provide a safe work environment and allow your stakeholders to see results quicker. So what can a safety program provide? What can it do? It's able to reduce a number of things, which can make, you know, if you have a lot of injuries, it's going to give you headaches because you're going to fill out a lot of paperwork. You have to, you know, do a lot of investigations, things like that. But if you have a safety culture in place, you know, you've already looked into the job hazards that are associated with each thing, maybe headed off before any of those happen. So it'll help reduce injuries, illnesses. If you reduce injury and illnesses, you're going to reduce your costs because you're going to be able to reduce your workers' comp cases, reduce your insurance claims, reduce your downtime, and it'll reduce property damage, which ties back into costs. Safety programs can also help increase a lot of aspects in your facility. Your productivity will go up. If all your staff are able to work and aren't missing time, then you're going to be able to, you know, produce more, do more research, all that. Your employees are going to be on the job more. Your equipment's going to last longer because it's being used properly and isn't being exposed to unnecessary hazards. Your communication between your management and your employees and, you know, that whole web is going to increase. When employees feel safe and empowered to take ownership of their safety program, they're much more willing to talk and bring all that to the forefront when there is an issue before it becomes a real problem and there's an injury that happens. And your employee confidence, they'll feel empowered. They'll feel like they understand why they're doing certain things, and that will help make them feel good and confident with the work they're doing, and it'll make them happy working where they're working. So in summary, there are a lot of federal, state, and local regulations and requirements, and depending on where you're located, your local regulations may change. State regulations, you know, if you expand, federal regulations are also there. You make sure that you're communicating hazards to your employees, whether that's hazardous materials such as chemicals, or it's hazardous waste, bio waste, medical waste, sharps if you're using, you know, any sort of needle or injection system or razor system, like that. Understanding sharps and sharp awareness, biosafety guidelines that are set forth, understanding that if you're working with a recombinant DNA, there may be some potential for that to revert back to an infectious agent. Implementing training and the whole safety program will allow you to have a better pulse on your company, get concerns from your employees. Oh, sorry about that. Better results from your employees, and they'll be able to talk to you better and give you their concerns before an actual accident happens. And you'll get productivity. You'll have lower costs associated with injuries and illnesses. And with that, I'm done. Dawn, do you have anything you would like to add?
I'm good.
Okay. If anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Great, Ryan and Dawn, thank you both so much. And it looks like we actually have a question here in Temple.
Okay.
Ryan, how much can let's say a new company expect to spend on the safety issues in a biotech environment? Is it 10%, 5%, or, you know, what is the general standard?
Dawn, do you have an idea on that?
That's a little bit tough. So not knowing the general value of that startup, I would say that for something like just getting your policies, procedures going, kind of the initial assessment, and a relatively low risk laboratory like a Biosafety One, I would think that if you were to utilize a consultant, or if you had contract a part-time EH&S firm to come in and do 8 hours a week or 8 hours a month, something like that, I would expect to be in maybe the tens of thousands, 20 to 50,000, something like that, over a period of maybe 6 to 8 months. It's really actually pretty reasonable to get up and running and be compliant in your EH&S policies, simply because so many of them are generated by the local area, the county and state and federal laws, and also your facility management as well.
I have a question for
Thanks,
Dawn. Dawn, I think in your presentation you mentioned that there are new standards for devices that are coming into play. Did I pick that up correctly?
Yes, so the MDR, MDSAP regulations are essentially the newest version of 13485, ISO 13485. This is the beefed up European regulation for medical devices, and BSI has always been a certifying body. We provide the CE mark for all devices that are going to be, all medical devices that are going to be sold into the European and UK market. But with the burden of Brexit and with the overhaul of the international standards, medical devices that are, I believe they have to be class 2, class 3, are subject to new standards. They're a little bit stronger than where they were previous. Now, that being said, all of the certifying bodies that are involved with medical device certification, of course, are overwhelmed right now with applications for all of these companies to bring their devices up to current regulations and the new regulations. So it's an overwhelming time. It's an unprecedented amount of regulatory change that we're seeing in med devices, but we are still obviously heavily involved, and will become a notifying body, which gives us essentially one more level up on a level of services we can provide. So if you have detailed questions, I can actually put you in touch with the head of our medical device service.
So this is happening because of Brexit. Is that what you're saying?
Brexit's one of the reasons. Another reason is the increase in medical devices that are digitally or electronically connected to hospitals, patient providers, and clinical services. With the increased regulation around GDPR for Europe, which is the requirement that all European citizens anywhere in the world are provided with data privacy. Any device that transmits digital information, these regulations also enfold that GDPR requirement.
Did you say specifically visual information?
Digital and electronic.
Okay, I got you. Well, that's very interesting.
It is wildly interesting. I just spent a week traveling with the med device team, doing road shows, essentially doing 8-hour days, various parts of the country to educate anybody that wants to learn about the new regulations. BSI is a very open book when it comes to helping folks get through regulatory change and understand what it is that they need to do. And so we have probably the best in class team when it comes to med devices. If you want to have a further conversation, I would absolutely put you in touch with the right person.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and are there any other questions for Ryan or Dawn?
No.
Anything else that either of you would like to add before we conclude today's session?
We just want to thank you for your time and participation. If you have any questions at all, we'd be happy to help. We're We are a network of very experienced consultants, technical experts. We're located all over the world. So don't hesitate to reach out, and we will put you directly in touch with the person that is best qualified to speak with you. And we're always happy to talk and at least help you with a flow of information to get you started.
Fantastic. Thank you both so much for your time and expertise.
Thank
Thank you
you.
all.